Going into retirement while making money at home. What? Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Dupree, scouring the globe to bring you stories of courage, passion, and resilience. If I could sum up this podcast into one word, I would use empathy. Now let's get inspired. Welcome to the Joyous Expansion Podcast. I am your host, Brett Dupree, your Joyous Expansion life coach, here to drop down the knowledge of positivity into your life. Today, you're going to learn a lot about retirement and how to retire, especially if you don't feel like you're in a position to. There's two people who are willing to help you. I like to call them the Hagstroms. Well, anyway, now is the part of my podcast where I start off talking about my life, because if I can't be vulnerable with you, how can I expect my guests to be vulnerable with me? My life is going pretty good so far. I'm doing a diet bet at dietbet.com. So I am on point to hit my goal of 4% loss this month. So hooray for that. Pretty much the way I do it is I eat like a human instead of eating like a person who wants to shut down all their emotions and fill their bellies with as much food as possible. In fact, for a week I lost like 5 pounds by just eating 3 smaller meals a day, which consisted of breakfast sandwiches practically for 3 meals a day, which I guess shows you how much I eat on a normal basis. But no, when I want to live an awesome life, which is my other podcast, the Church of Awesome podcast, that really makes me think about my life and how I want to be awesome, because here I am spouting the virtues of awesomeness. So I should practice what I preach, as the great Barry White song said. If you haven't heard that song, I highly suggest it. Barry White is amazing. Sexy, sexy voice. Maybe not as sexy as mine. Haha, joke there. I've been thinking about my life. About 2.5 years ago, I made a decision that I have not even closely felt like I lived up to. I'm working towards it though. But it was hard. I decided to make it so my outside reality does not affect my inner reality, basing it on the old school proverb that Les Brown talks about a lot. If there's no enemy on the outside, the enemy on the... Wait, I always get that backed up. If there's no enemy on the inside, then the enemy on the outside can do you no harm. I don't know if that is an African proverb, but it sounds good. And I think it's the way to live with enlightenment, as well as that is the way of Byron Katie and Wayne Dyer and a lot of luminaries. In fact, Viktor Frankl says between stimulus and response, there is space. Within that space, there is choice. And within that choice, there lies all the freedom. That is a very condensed version of his saying, but it's the same idea, to be able to choose your reaction. What really got me thinking about this is I was at work yesterday and I saw someone was in the U-Dis village about 3 o'clock. And so I put on their post a link to the Lightworker Toastmasters, thinking that they might be interested in going. And they sent me a mail asking how do I have the audacity to advertise on their post, as if I would want to advertise on their post. It's not like the person was big, has a lot of friends, and the post only had 4 messages. So obviously it was not an advertisement. Any reasonable person, in my humble opinion, would think the same, because why? I'm like, no, I thought you might enjoy it and you're within the area. But the rudeness of her reply and the fact that I don't want negative people in my life. It turned out she unfriended me, which was fine, because I was about to unfriend her. So I just did the next best thing, to block her, because I don't need that kind of BS in my life. But it's been 2 days and it still kind of bothers me. It's still part of my mind. And I know it's silly. I know it's over. I know every aspect of it, but there's still a part that it bothers me, because I don't want to upset people. There is a part of me that really does not want to upset people, doesn't want people mad at me. I'm not a fan when people are mad at me. And so I've been having more of the awareness, instead of being mad at myself of why are you letting something stupid bother you? Because honestly, that is just creating a situation where I am taking an aspect that bothers me, and then I'm making the fact that it bothers me bothering me, and then I'm using that as the proverbial, as Abraham talks about of Esther Hicks, the excuse to feel bad, which is silly to me when you really think about it. When there's something in your life that you don't like, and then you get mad at yourself for feeling that way, you're now being mad at yourself for being upset, which is just counterproductive. So just analyzing that the feelings, and it's probably something tied to my youth. Maybe I should EFT, even though people are upset with me. I completely and deeply love and accept myself. Or I'm sorry, thank you, I forgive you, You're welcome. A little Ho'oponopono for you. Dropping Ho'oponopono on your butt. While that is it's a hard way to live. I totally agree with that idea. But when you think about it, it is the most realistic way to live because honestly, you have the ability to create your reality. And by create your reality, I mean you have the ability to interpret your reality any way that you want. You do not have to think that certain aspects of your life are terrible. And I'm not saying that if you do, it's your fault. I don't want to victim blame here, as I see a lot of people do, especially the poor people, because poverty is difficult. It is very hard on the psyche, and honestly, I'm sick of these ideas where all a poor person has to do is save all their money and not eat. I mean, once you get on that cycle of poverty, it's hard to break. It's very hard to break. But anyway, this is not about poverty. This is just me telling you that if you are in a situation where you are stuck in that, I am not saying that you are a bad person. You are perfectly fine and your feelings are valid. Your thoughts are valid. You do have the choice to change them. I truly believe that. Just for some, it's going to be harder based off the circumstances, and that's fine. Right now, it's hard for me to lose weight. When I've reached the 400-pound mark, just the physical changes in my body and the yo-yo dieting, it makes it more difficult. When I get to a certain point, I get depressed because my body wants to put that weight back on again. And that makes it difficult. But I do know that with seeking help and meditation and other things to do in my life, I can make it easier and I can make that choice. At least I have faith. I believe. And so I continue on the path of working on creating my reality, making my life what I want it to be. And I think that's very important and a great way to live, to create the life that you want by viewing things the way you want them. Because it's your mind. You are your mind. You just have to train it. And it's not your fault. The way we are wired is negative because negativity keeps us alive in the wild. Being overly optimistic and viewing everything as friendly when you go up to hug a bear, it will maul you. So you better think to yourself that bear wants to kill you before that bear wants to befriend you. It's just in our modern life, really, for most of us, including a lot of the people who are under the poverty line in this country, most of the things that bother us are not life and death, though our brain treats it as such. Which is why I'm saying it's not your fault, because chances are you're not going to die. However, your brain thinks you are because you feel the stress of not being able to pay rent. You feel the stress of paying your bills. When you feel behind and your ability to make better choices decreases, it's because your brain is hyper-focused on fixing the problem or hyper-focused on ignoring the problem so you can just deal with life. And making good choices is more difficult. And accepting the reality of that is very important. Accepting your reality that if you are behind, it will be more difficult to push yourself ahead. And the more behind you are, it'll be more difficult. So reach out for more help. I think that's the most important part. Doing this podcast, the thing that it really solidified for me on this 30th episode of my podcast is how important it is to seek help. Because most of the people on my podcast, except for maybe the person other than a future interview with this guy who seemed to figure out everything for himself. He's the only person that I can think of that seemed to pull himself up by his bootstraps. Everyone else sought help, and due to their ability to seek help, they're able to change their lives. And if you're looking for help on your retirement, I have the interview for you. Let me introduce you to David and Dana Hagstrom. Let's start with David. David got his PhD in biblical studies and was a parish pastor for 34 years. He served in a number of churches, and during those years he published 2 books and taught classes at a couple seminaries. Dana didn't finish college, opted for her MRS degree, and have wonderful children to show for it. She was a paralegal by profession for 30 years. They retired to Mexico in October of 2016 with 4 Japanese chins, and were ready for some rest and relaxation of years in their high-stress jobs. After 4 years, an opportunity fell into their laps that they couldn't ignore, and now they're energized beyond belief at this new opportunity. They are not ready to retire. They're ready for a new mission, helping you on your home business. And now, here is Dana and David Hagstrom. Hello, David and Dana, and welcome to my podcast.
Well, thank you, Brett, so much for having us. We enjoy meeting new people and sharing our story with folks. Thank you for inviting us on.
Happy to have you. Let's start with that. Tell us a little bit about your story, your journey to retirement, is it?
Yes, I'll be glad to do that. As I look back, I'm very grateful. I had a very satisfying and rewarding 34-year career as a pastor, but I have to say it was filled with highs and lows like pretty much everyone else's careers. I started out at age 28. I had 2 master's degrees and a PhD in biblical interpretation, and arrived at this small rural church in South Dakota. And after I'd been there a couple weeks, I vividly recall going out riding with one of my new friends on his tractor one day, while he said, "That was a really interesting sermon yesterday, Pastor. What were you trying to say?" And let's just say I had a lot to learn. It seems like the years went by pretty quickly, and a few years later, I was senior pastor of a significantly larger church, and ministry was growing and flourishing until I ran into a major setback, a divorce and major depression. And I think, again, some of your listeners can relate to having significant setbacks in our stories as well. After some time, things began to come back together again. I'm again senior pastor in a large congregation, excited to really use my gift for strategic planning. I love to analyze ministry strengths and weaknesses and set goals and help people put step-by-step strategies in place. And then my career peaks as an executive and teaching pastor in a huge congregation, which were several very invigorating years, until the senior pastor decided to implement a different staff model, calling for someone with very different gifts than mine. I found myself, and I think, again, this is a very common experience, but also very personal. At age 58, there I was applying for new ministry positions, but now at a time when things are extremely different. Because in every case I applied for, I was chosen as one of their top candidates to interview, and yet in every case, and that's more than 20, they chose someone in their 30s or 40s, someone who looked in many ways like I might have a few years earlier. And again, I wonder how many people can relate to that kind of position or a situation, being laid off, but now at an age where you're no longer as attractive to the marketplace as you were when you were a number of years younger. So suddenly I found myself in a situation that was vaguely familiar from 30 years earlier in that small town with a small congregation, although now with a full gamut of ministry skills, finely tuned for working with a large staff. I think we had 26 on our paid staff on our church.
Before we got to the small town.
Before we got to the small town. And to say the least, it was quite a shock to the system.
Yeah.
Well, for the next 5 years in this small town, ministry was still rewarding, but I have to say the frustrations were mounting. I still loved our annual meetings where I would set forth our broad stroke goals and plans for the coming year until the final year, where after I'd spent weeks of prayer and reflection and analyzing their situation, I just had to announce honestly, folks, I really don't know where the Lord is leading us this year. And by now, this small declining church was stretched financially and can barely afford to pay me. And honestly, frankly, I was feeling tired, like I'd given about all I had to give. And here's where it sort of reaches climax, yeah, so to speak, is one night I took a careful look at our pension account and calculated that I still needed to work another 6 to 8 years before we could comfortably retire. And in some frustration, I went out to the other room to tell Dana that news and added jokingly, unless we decide to do something radical like retire now and move to Mexico.
I remember that night vividly because I didn't know what sort of struggles he was going through. I was kind of immune to all of that. I was busy with my own ministry stuff going on. But when he came and made that, I didn't know it was a joke. In my eyes, I was I was kind of invigorated by it. I've always had this adventuresome spirit. And when he said move to Mexico, I'm like, well, why not? We're still young. Let's go enjoy life. That to me was kind of a turning point. And then it kind of hit us both, I think, the reality of it. We got on our knees and we made sure that was really what God wanted for us. And it was kind of the culmination, I think, of what David was facing and not feeling any leading or any leadership goals for our church. It was probably because the Lord was leading us in a new path. And so we had to embrace that a little bit.
Yeah, I vividly recall one of the things that you said was that you'd rather have the years with me than have the higher standard of living from building our pension fund.
Exactly.
So we took several months to do due diligence, but in less than a year after that night, we were retired and living in our new country. And our transition from the pain of facing the apparent end to my career, at least that's how it felt to me, and without sufficient assets to retire to a expected solution. We realized later that as regards the challenges that we were facing, we were far from alone. There are so many people in my baby boom generation, perhaps some younger as well, nearing the end of your careers, and yet without the resources to retire at the age or in the manner that we had expected. Perhaps some of your listeners have even been downsized or find yourself contemplating your job security in light of the economic situation and realize that while things might look good right now, you too might face a situation where your career comes to an end unexpectedly or earlier than you planned. Well, what do you do then? So Dana and I soon began to sense a new calling to help others find a way to retire, not necessarily to move abroad like we had, maybe to start planning a little bit earlier than we had, to bridge the financial divide between where they are and where they expected to be at this stage of life. And I want you to know this. I believe that you can bridge the gap to an enjoyable, rewarding retirement. So over these last 3 years, Dana and I have been helping people with issues relating to retirement and transition and building new income streams.
Giving hope.
Yeah.
What kind of issues do you generally deal with?
Well, particularly not knowing what or how they're going to get from one, they've got a dream where they want to be. Maybe they're starting a new business and they just don't know how to get there. Issues with time management. That's a huge thing for people these days. They're still working full-time jobs and needing to know what to do in making the most out of each moment. I guess I can speak to that because when I was working a full-time job, at least in our last parish, I was a full-time job involving a 2-hour commute each day. Plus I had a piano studio and we were starting a home business. And of course, being a pastor's wife, that brings you wear a lot of hats. Working with the youth. I was a worship leader. We were doing black belt. We were studying for our black belt. We had a lot going on. And I learned how to block my day. I learned how to really manage the things that I had to get done. And I love, especially, that's one of my favorite things, is to help people work out their own issues for time management, particularly. But that's just one small piece.
Most people seem to approach it from financial perspective, although there's a lot more to think about than that. But for one thing, I often find people that really don't know what they've got, what their current assets are, nor what it will cost to maintain the lifestyle that they are dreaming of. Let me just give you a quick walk through our process for building that bridge between people's current reality and a desirable retirement. We've pictured it like building a bridge. And you start by surveying the situation and then designing the bridge, and finally the construction, building the bridge. The first part is surveying the situation. And we ask a lot of questions like, what would your ideal retirement look like? Where would you like to live? If you anticipate moving, will you be downsizing or maybe spreading out? What criteria do you have for a new community? Will you live in your own home, a condo, a rented home or apartment, or maybe a retirement community? where you need to travel in order to see family and friends, and how often would you like to do so? What dreams do you have? Are there new experiences you dream of having? Are there travel destinations you dream of seeing? Those are big things, but what will you do day to day? And that's just the first handful of questions, and listeners don't need to write them out. We'll be happy to send out a PDF copy that covers a lot more than that.
Right. Because people need to get clear on what they're looking for in their retirement. Some people have never even thought about it yet.
Exactly.
They're so busy getting from point A to point B in their lives that retirement seems like a dream way off into the future. But the sooner you can start thinking about it and planning for it, the better.
And when we hear people talking about retirement, too often they're just talking about what they're going to retire from. And what we want to help them to change their perspective and think about, what are you retiring to? And then we need to go on and think about, what are the costs? What ongoing expenses will you have? Will some drop away? What will you need to allocate for major trips? What new hobbies or entertainment or travel or charity giving do they want to fund? Do they have plans for medical expenses and long-term care?
That can be very expensive.
It can. And that's one of the things that we have found costing way more than we anticipated. And then we need people to also review their current financial reality, to check with Social Security and get up-to-date copies of their contribution records and what income they can anticipate from Social Security. Then to do a complete audit of their current assets, everything from investments to real estate to pension funds and so on. And similarly, to do an audit of any liabilities that may be there, mortgages, car loans, sometimes children's educational loans.
Right. Credit cards, bills.
Yeah. And then one of the things we ask people to do is to check with their financial advisor. We help people do the planning and thinking through all of where they'd like to be, but we don't give financial advice per se. And there are licensed people that have been accredited to do that, and we make sure that they get an opinion on that. What monthly income can they safely count on to fund their living in retirement? Well, then we get back with them and talk about, okay, this is how you would like to live in retirement, and this is what you currently have. What's the financial gap? And there are a variety of ways of addressing that. One is that people scale back their dreams. Another is they decide to keep working for another couple years. But we'd like to think that there are other possibilities besides those things that sort of feel a little bit like giving in.
Well, right. And to help people think outside the box, because people aren't necessarily thinking strategically. They just know what everybody else has done or what they saw their parents do or their neighbors do.
And as we found, the model that worked for our parents
doesn't work for us.
No, it doesn't.
No.
So now that we've clarified the extent of the challenge, it's time to explore people's mindset. Simply put, do they tend to look at the negative side and see the risks and feel like there are scarce resources? Or are they someone who sees a world of abundance filled with opportunities that call for going for it and living generously? And maybe some of you have encountered failures and setbacks that leave you anxious or at least a little bit fearful. Or on the opposite end of the spectrum, you might be more like a Steve Jobs who just sort of felt like everything was endless possibilities.
Creative thinking.
So depending on your mindset, you might be raring to go, ready to tackle the gap between your vision and your current situation. Or others may be feeling paralyzed and hopeless. And if we find that people are intimidated by the challenge, then we have to help them discover what the limiting beliefs are that hold them back. For example, we were reading the book together, Your Best Year Ever by Michael Hyatt. And he talks about his own struggle with feeling he could barely make enough money to meet his family's needs. Until, with some counseling, he learned to replace that belief with the liberating truth, in his own words, I have all the money I need to meet our obligations accomplish our goals, and be generous with others. And that is a mental shift that just makes a huge difference in how you approach things. Well, the fact is that people can make those shifts. It's easy for some people to say, well, I'm just not made that way. That's not how I think of things. The task at that point is to help them to struggle with that and come to the place where they do make that shift. I remember when myself, just a few years ago, feeling past my prime and feeling like retirement was just being put out to pasture. And then I was reminded that Moses in the Bible didn't even start his grand mission till he was 80. Colonel Sanders hadn't even dreamed of KFC when he was my age. I came to say, okay, I'm at this point in life, but I have a wealth of experience and skills and wisdom. And so do you. So people may need to take time to analyze their limiting beliefs and replace them with liberating truths that you really can go for it and design a bridge to a better future. So once we have those things in place and we've looked at the situation, both the financial realities, their dreams, and their mindset or their inner reality, now it's time to start designing the bridge from where we are to where we'd like to be. Mm-hmm. And the first thing we ask people is, what do you have to offer? And what can you do? List out your work experience. And that might be a lot of different things over the years. What are your gifts? What are your hobbies? What are you really interested in? What are you passionate about? For example, someone might say, well, I've got experience in management. I love playing my musical instrument. Or maybe, well, my real passion and interest is in cookie decorating. Or, you just get people to list out as many different ideas as possible. And then the next big question is, what problem can you solve? And think about the problems that other people have in their lives, and what problem could you solve for someone else? If you can solve a specific problem for someone or for some business, you can probably make far more money than just by selling your time working by the hour. For example, I ask some people, could you show someone how to build a website? Or if that's not your thing, could you show them how to build a deck on their house? Or could you offer to do it for them? There's so many ways that people could work virtually from a computer in their home, from being a typist or accountant or a virtual assistant to building websites or building a network marketing business or doing affiliate marketing online. We ask people, what problems can they think of that they could solve with the skills that they have? And then the next question is, well, who can you help? And we try to help them to get as clear as possible about their target market, asking, who would you like to talk to about this? Who could you serve? How old would they be? Are they married or single or male or female or couples? Do they have kids or grandkids? What's their job or profession? What's their education level? What are their hobbies, their hopes and dreams? And then a couple key things is once they have a particular person in mind, what we like to call an avatar, an ideal customer. Now, what do they really want? For example, someone goes to the store and says, I'm looking for a drill. And, well, do they really want a drill just because they want to enhance what's in their shop? Or
do they need a hole?
They probably want a hole somewhere. And it's not just because they want a hole, but because there's some end that they want to accomplish. There's some project that they want to finish. Well, then we ask, what are their biggest problems and challenges? And once people get really clear about who they're going to serve, then it becomes time to begin to build an income stream, or as we would say, build their bridge to retirement. The idea is clear, but it's still all in their head or maybe on paper or on their computer screen. But now it's time to start doing something. Implementing
Execute.
It. There you go.
So many people, they get their plan to the planning stage, but then they don't implement.
Right.
There's fear there. How do I do it? Where do I start?
Exactly. What do I do day to day?
Yeah.
When they get to step 3, they've surveyed the situation, they've designed their bridge, so to speak, their income stream. Now it's time to build that bridge. And the first step in that is building an audience. Whether you're selling your time, your expertise, or a physical product, you need to build an audience of prospective clients or customers. And back a generation ago, people would say, well, let's put out a want ad, or let's use the Yellow Pages. But those days are pretty well behind us. We, for example, are building our audience via social media, email, and things like Twitter and Instagram, our blog, Facebook Messenger. But that's after we've been doing this for some time. When people are starting out, I advise them to pick one particular platform to start on and to get really good at that before they add another one. It's not just a matter of building a large number of people, say on your Twitter account, but you need to engage with those people. You need to talk with them to find out what they're really thinking, to engage in conversations and building relationships with people. And along the way, you want to be sharing your wisdom and expertise and develop a reputation as a credible expert in your niche, somebody that doesn't just talk, but provides real value. And over time, you build what we talk about as the know, like, and trust factor. Because really, people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust. I have a friend that often talks about if you decided you wanted to buy a new television and you had just figured out exactly what model you wanted to get.
You're on your way to Best Buy.
Yeah, you're on your way to Best Buy and stopped in traffic, and here some guy walks up to the window of your car and he's holding this television, exactly the model that you want, and says, hey, I'll give you that for $500 off the retail price. What do you do? Are you going to buy it, or are you going to continue going to Best Buy? And I don't know about you, but I'd rather go to Best Buy or whatever place it is where you know, like, and trust them, where you have a sense that, hey, I'll be treated fairly. I'll get my money's worth. I know that if I have a problem, I can go back and they'll stand by it. Yep. Yeah. So then after building your audience and engaging with them, at some point, you need to promote your product or service or affiliate products or whatever it might be that people offer. And at that point, of course, we have to get really specific with people about what it is that they are offering and what would be the best way to do that. And that's pretty much the entire process that we walk people through, although we could certainly go into a lot more detail. But I realize listeners are probably wondering, okay, that's a lot of stuff. Is there a way we could walk through that whole process with you? Yes, that's something that we can do. And if people wonder exactly what we offer, what we've designed is an 8-week coaching experience where we walk people through those steps. We cover surveying your situation. We help them envision their ideal retirement and establish a realistic estimate of what it will cost. We consider their current reality and inventory their resources and figure out very precisely what that gap is that remains. And then we work on getting past any limiting beliefs that could derail our efforts. Secondly, we design their bridge to retirement by helping them assess what they have to offer, what problems they can solve, and who they can best serve. And then we begin building that bridge to retirement by sharpening their focus, helping them identify and begin engaging an audience of prospective clients or customers who can benefit from your wisdom, skills, and experience. And then we help them to focus on generating that new income stream, developing the offer of their product or service, and considering how best to promote that offer. What we found is that process works for people that are planning to retire in a couple months or who are 5 years from retirement. Or more. In fact, the more the better, because then they have more time to prepare and have things really set before they do. when they finish that 8-week process, I'll say when you finish that, speaking to your listeners, you'll have a complete step-by-step plan, a blueprint for that bridge that will guide you all the way to your enjoyable, rewarding future.
Wow, nice. That is a lot of information.
That was
Well,
That is a lot of
a very
stuff.
long answer to that question.
My wife knows has to be careful about asking me a question because
You get pretty passionate about this.
I do.
Well, we are getting towards the end of our interview, and one thing I like to ask all my listeners to give a 1 minute of motivation. One way to think about this is metaphor that you're a time machine and you go back in time to your old self, but you only have 1 minute to convey the information that you need to succeed, or just condense your entire life purpose into a minute. Are you ready?
I guess I'd have to ask a question. Are you one of those people that will fear that you'll never be able to leave the rat race and retire to a life of your dreams? As a former pastor, and I was a paralegal, and we retired from our positions back in the Midwest about 2.5 years ago, retiring to Mexico, walking away from everything that was familiar. And now we're operating a marketing company from home. It's giving us a new lease. We're thinking outside the box. And we've got this big, we call it our hairy, audacious goal.
That's Jim Collins' original phrase.
Yeah, but we're helping 5,000 baby boomers improve their life and their financial status by making retirement possible. And it all starts with building the financial bridge of retirement that we've been working on here. And so if you're not alone, if you're nearing the end of your career with a huge fear, it's like having a big weight around your neck. And due to either outstanding debt or just insufficient savings and investments, let Dr. David, that's what I like to call him, teach you how to make retirement possible by showing you how to build a financial bridge to your retirement.
Good job.
Yeah, let them learn from our mistakes. And what we've started this process, we want to help others do the same.
Awesome. Thank you. Your information, I'm sure, will help many people. Retirement is something that most of us are hopefully lucky enough to have to deal with. Your information, I'm sure, will help many people reach their goals. So thank you so much for your time on my podcast, and thank you so much for your service to humanity as a whole.
Well, thank you for having us.
We appreciate it. It's been fun.
Hope your day is special. And there you have it, folks. That is the interview with Dan and Dana Hagstrom. They had a lot of information on how you too can help with your retirement by creating a plan and start your own business at the same time. Two things, if you're thinking about that, they could help you out a lot, especially if you're like me and your retirement plan is the Matrix. Every time I see one of those videos of robots doing human things, I say, yes, we're getting closer to the robot uprising, because remember, the first Matrix was a paradise. Can't think of a better place to retire than in a virtual reality where all my whims are taken care of. Dealing with life and accepting your reality is very difficult, and especially when it comes to retirement and when it comes to living out your final years on this planet, it is important to plan and to make good decisions so that you are able to live in a way that allows you to enjoy those last years. I remember my grandparents, and each one of them had a different experience in retirement, with only one of them having a good one. But one was more of an entrepreneur and the other two were teachers, and the teachers had a decent retirement due to having teacher pension, I believe, or whatever they had. And the other one was the entrepreneur did well because he did good at saving his money and enjoying his life, and he owned his home and all that fun things. All those fun things. I know it can be hard to deal with those things because our age and younger is going to be harder and harder to retire. And as long as we don't destroy this planet in the next couple years, we are getting better at keeping people alive, even with all the anti-vax BS. And yes, I am very anti-vax. I believe that we are very good. Yeah, we are very good at keeping people alive, even with measles making a comeback. We still are living to a decent age, and we're not that far from curing aging, really. We are actually closer than we can imagine, especially if everything from the gut bacteria turns out to be true and they get better at that. They have a better way to make us healthy a little bit easier. So you got to ask yourself, what are you going to do? And if you're in a position where you can start saving for your retirement, well, you should probably do that. you should probably do that. And if you want help from the Hagstroms, you can find them at davidandana.com. It's DAVIDNDANA. There you will find a top earner framework, the secret, the 3 steps framework. Learn how to get fresh leads, sales, and signups in your business, leveraging the power of the internet. So if you're looking to work with them, you can schedule a call at their website. You can also see them on their Facebook page, Facebook, Ask David and Dana. I don't know why I keep on. Oh, because of David Data. David and Dana. That is the 30th episode of the Joyous Expansion podcast in the bag. Almost a year from when I started it. And now I am 30 episodes in. Technically about 22 episodes behind, but that's life. I do want to say that at the beginning of my podcast, I said something along the lines of, this is your brain focusing. I do want to say that that's more of my theory than what's exactly happening. I feel I'm talking as an expert, but I'm just someone who reads. It's a myriad of different reasons, but that is okay. I just wanted to put that out there and I don't change that because the beginning of my podcast is 100% free-flowing. If you like this podcast, please like and subscribe. Leave a review. Those helps. Add some stars. Those are cool. If you want to email me, you can email me at BRE2TsDUPR2Es@joyousexpansion.com, which is where you can find me at joyousexpansion.com, where you can get my free ebook on how to break through the prison of fear, which is obviously something I've done because now I've done 30 podcasts. I'm on Facebook at Increase Your Joy and Joyous Expansion at both Instagram and Twitter. Also, you can find more of these podcasts at pod.joyousexpansion.com. If you do podcast.joyousexpansion.com, you could see how I was about 3 or 4 years ago when I did my first podcast. So I am Dupree, your champion of authentic joy, joyous expansion, life coach, catalyst of transformation, and cult leader of the Church of Awesome. Hoping that your day is amazing, that every day that you live, and thanking you so much for making it this far and listening to me. Know that because of you, I appreciate you for who you are, and I love you for who you are, and I wish you to be joy, to be love, to be awesome. Now play my jingle.
JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Come and say hello to Dupree. He is an inspirational life coach, good for you and good for me. He turned my life from grey to blue, I'm sure he'll do the same for you. Get in touch and you'll see your life will change dramatically. JoyousExpansion.com. JoyousExpansion.com. Yeah.